I'm from the city where people be getting threatened for showing they facing precincts. Ladies leasing, arranging, and renting basements and regions. Some people making that change and spent in places that's decent. It costs from summers before they replace it with something recent. Memphis, them rubber bands that show people your grind is money. Here they just quick to see it and claim it. It's kind of funny. They buy into the gimmick instead of saying it's him again. They tried and it take them too long to realize they mimicking. Said that people had trouble naming their favorite rapper. Most of them getting older. None of them in the trap. And in reality, they working, but none of them on the map.
Drake came into an industry where the streets were a central factor, and the thing that stood out about Drake was his lack of a street edge. Drake was a plucky child actor who starred on the Canadian TV show Degrassi. On the show, he was shot and bound to a wheelchair as the character Jimmy Brooks. He was also a good kid from middle-class roots, so on the surface, his origin story was different from any rapper prior. For the longest time, Drake was acknowledged as the good kid in hip-hop. It seemed like he embraced that for a while. Drake was brand friendly, charming, and overall marketable, but over time, something happened. Drake started to get slightly more sinister. His self-referential and introspective rap started to become angrier and more targeted. He began to speak tougher in his music, invoking a spirit of violence in ways that people believed were outside of his wheelhouse. Even on his most recent album, Drake says on the record, "Whisper my name, baby boy please, I heard what you said to Lil Bro about me. Yeah, and when you ran into the Iceman, what are you gonna do except freeze? You're not about to squeeze, you're not in the streets." The first line is of course addressing an adversary and is remarking just how frightened that opponent will be when they run into Drake, taunting him by saying they aren't in the streets like he is. So what happened to Drake? Another line on the same song, Drake says, "Whisper my name and don't say it too loud, cause you gotta come here and you know I pop out. We turned up Coachella, had boys backing down, and we might do the same if we touch Rolling Loud." Plot twist shows the same change as well as National Treasures. What happened is Drake underwent what's called a negative change arc. A negative change arc is a narrative structure in which a character does not overcome a flaw, false belief, or moral wound, instead becomes increasingly shaped by them. From an academic perspective, the arc traces the gradual collapse between the character's original desire and their ethical identity. What begins as ambition, grief, fear, revenge, or longing becomes the force that reorganizes the self. Unlike a positive change arc where conflict produces growth, the negative change arc shows conflict producing distortion. The character adapts to the world, but adapts in an abnormal direction. They gain power, clarity, or control, yet lose empathy, innocence, restraint, or moral balance. In this sense, the negative change arc is simply not a fall from good to evil, it is the dramatization of how a person can mistake victory for transformation while becoming less whole in the process. The negative change arc belongs to the tradition of tragedy. Aristotle argues that most powerful tragic movement is not from bad fortune to good fortune, but from good fortune to bad. The character does not simply become evil overnight. Their downfall comes through hamartia, an error, frailty, or weakness that slowly reorganizes their life. In modern terms, we might say the negative change arc is a failed transformation. The character experiences pressure, trauma, ambition, prophecy, revenge, or fear, but instead of becoming wiser, they become more imprisoned by the very flaw they need to overcome. Literature has always understood the negative change arc. Macbeth does not begin as a monster, Dorian Gray does not begin as corruption itself, Othello does not begin as a broken man. The tragedy is that each character mistakes their wound for wisdom, their fear for strength, and their desire for destiny, and by the end they have become the very thing their story was warning them against. My favorite example of the negative change arc in fiction is Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan. Eren begins as a traumatized but heroic figure, a boy who watches the world violate his home, kill his mother, and reduce human life to survival behind the walls. At first, his rage feels righteous. He wants freedom. He wants to protect his friends. He wants humanity to survive. But the tragedy of Eren is that the world keeps proving his worst instincts right. Every revelation expands the scale of his hatred. The enemy is no longer just Titans. It becomes the country of Marley. Then it becomes the entire world outside the island. His desire for freedom slowly mutates into a willingness to destroy anyone who threatens that freedom. That is what makes his arc so powerful. Eren does not become a villain because he stops caring. He becomes a villain because he cares so intensely, so violently, and so narrowly that he can no longer imagine freedom without annihilation. Eren Yeager's negative change arc is fascinating because his core belief never really changes. From the beginning, he believes that freedom only belongs to those willing to fight for it. The tragedy is that the meaning of fight keeps expanding. First, it means fight the Titans. Then it means fight nations. Eventually, it means fighting the world itself. His famous line, "If I don't fight, I can't win," begins as the language of resistance, but by the end of the final act, it becomes the logic of mass destruction. Eren is not a character who loses his ideals. Instead, he is a character who follows one ideal so completely that it destroys every other part of him. Drake's negative change arc, however, is not that he begins innocent and becomes evil. It's much more subtle than that. At the beginning of his career, Drake begins as an artist whose power comes from emotional honesty. His song Successful speaks to a key piece of Drake's psychology where he says, "Diss me and you'll never hear a reply for it." It's hard to say if this is Drake exuding some level of moral superiority over the rap game, an industry filled with feuds and rivalry, or if this is the naivete of a young man yet to truly interact with the industry in a meaningful way outside of fantasy. The Resistance is one of the clearest early documents of his innocence and optimism toward his destiny. On the surface, the song sounds like Drake celebrating the arrival of fame. He is young, successful, desirable, and finally inside of the life he once imagined from the outside. But underneath the success is anxiety. The song is not really about winning, it is about what winning is already costing him. He says, "I am still here with who I started with. The game needed life, I put my heart in it. I blew myself up, I'm on some martyr shit, carry the weight for my city like a cargo ship." Drake is standing at the threshold of stardom, but he is already sensing the emotional price of the empire he's building. He talks like someone surrounded by opportunity, but also like someone losing access to ordinary intimacy. The relationships around him are changing. The people he knew before fame now feel distant. He goes on to say, "I heard they just moved my grandmother to a nursing home, and I be acting like I don't know how to work a phone. But hit redial, you'll see that I just called some chick I met at the mall and I barely knew at all." The women in his life become symbols of memory, guilt, temptation, and emotional unfinished business. Even when he is moving forward, he is haunted by what he is leaving behind. The key tension is that Drake wants success to heal him, but the success only gives him a more expensive version of the same loneliness. This is where the negative change arc begins. Early Drake does not sound cold just yet. He sounds overwhelmed. He still wants connection. He still wants to be understood. But he is also starting to learn the emotional logic that will define his later music. If love can betray you, if loyalty can shift, if people only value you once you become successful, then the safest thing to do is to become untouchable. That is the seed of later Drake. Before the enemies, before the paranoia, before the armored confidence, there is the resistance. A young man realizing that fame will not simplify his wounds, it will multiply them. His vulnerability does not disappear, it begins to harden. The soft confession becomes a defense mechanism. The open wound becomes a brand, and the desire to be loved becomes the desire to be powerful enough that rejection can never fully humiliate him again. So when we talk about Drake's negative change arc, the resistance is a good origin point. It shows the moment before the armor fully forms. His psychological obstacles and perhaps his fundamental flaw is revealed. He believes he can have the past and the future at the same time. On the resistance, Drake is not yet the emperor looking down from the tower. He is the young artist climbing toward it, already feeling the cost of the height. If the resistance is the beginning of Drake's negative change arc, then the ride is where the armor becomes visible. By this point, Drake is no longer just imagining fame from the outside, he is inside of it. He has the success, the rooms, the women, the money, the industry recognition, the machine around him. But the song does not sound victorious. It sounds exhausted. It sounds like a man trying to explain that the life everyone envies has started to deform him. The opening posture of the ride is important because Drake is almost irritated by being misunderstood or a fake attempt to understand him. He pushes back against the idea that people feel him because to him, they only see the outcome. They see the fame, but not the emotional cost of fame. They see the artist on the top, but not the paranoia, the loneliness, the strange relationship, or the feeling that love has become impossible to trust. That is why one of the central tensions of the song is the difference between being loved and being used. Drake describes a world where everyone says they love you, but then undercuts it with saying it's not love. That distinction is the heart of the negative change arc. The problem is not that Drake is unloved, the problem is worse. He is surrounded by performances of love that feel transactional. Fame gives him attention, but it also makes attention suspicious. This is where the vulnerable Drake starts becoming the guarded Drake. In the Resistance, he is still asking whether success can heal the wound. In the Ride, he is beginning to accept that success may actually deepen it. The more famous he becomes, the less certain he is that anyone around him is sincere. So the emotional logic changes. Vulnerability is no longer just something he expresses in music. Vulnerability becomes something he manages, controls, and eventually weaponizes. The tragedy of the Ride is that Drake sounds self-aware enough to know what fame is doing to him, but not free enough to escape it. He can diagnose the emptiness, but he still keeps moving through it. He can see that love has become contaminated by status, but he still wants the status. He can tell that the lifestyle is hollow, but he is also seduced by the very life that is hollowing him out. Drake says, "You won't feel me till you want it so bad you tell yourself you're in it, and tell the world around you that your paperwork is finished, and steal your mother's debit card so you maintain an image, and ride around in overpriced rentals that ain't tinted." So in the arc of Drake's persona, the Ride is not just the moment he becomes cold. It is more interesting than that. It is the moment where he realizes coldness might be necessary, especially for those who don't understand the sacrifices he made to get to this point. If love cannot be trusted, if praise is conditional, if everyone wants access to the winner but not the wounded person underneath, then emotional distance begins to feel like survival. That is the negative change arc. Drake does not stop being sensitive. He becomes sensitive in a world where sensitivity feels dangerous. So he learns to protect the wound with power, luxury, sarcasm, suspicion, and control. The Ride is the sound of that transformation beginning to take shape. I remember hearing Take Care in 2011, feeling like this was a different Drake from Thank Me Later. Another one of those moments is on Headlines, where the good kid starts leaning into the tough talk that rappers have always used to protect themselves. When he gestures toward violence with a line like "catch a body like that," it doesn't sound like pure street confession, it sounds like persona transformation. Drake is learning that in rap, emotional honesty can only take you so far before you have to build armor around it. Stay Scheming was another important point in Drake's negative change arc because the fantasy of the music industry starts to break in the public. Drake is not just rapping as someone who wants to be accepted anymore, he's rapping as someone who has entered the room, looked around, and realized people he once admired are smaller, pettier, and more insecure than he imagined. That's what makes the line about the gods acting beneath themselves so revealing. Drake is using God to describe older, powerful figures in rap, the people who were supposed to be above the jealousy, gossip, and emotional fragility. But instead of finding wisdom at the top, he finds ego, he finds insecurity, he finds people who act just as wounded and competitive as everyone else. This matters because early Drake still seems to believe in the romance of the music industry. He wants the legends to recognize him. He wants the success to feel meaningful. He wants the top of the mountain to be sacred. But Stay Scheming suggests that when he finally reaches that world, the sacredness disappears. The gods are not gods, they are rivals. They are men with grudges. There are people protecting their own status. So once again, Drake's vulnerability becomes armored. His disappointment turns into contempt. His desire for approval turns into the need to prove that he does not need approval at all. That is the negative change arc. The dream does not simply come true, the dream disappoints him, and the disappointment makes him colder. In The Resistance, Drake is realizing fame will not cure loneliness. In The Ride, he realizes fame turns loneliness into a lifestyle. But by Stay Scheming, he realizes the industry itself is not the fantasy he thought it was. The people at the top are not above the emotional games, they are trapped inside of them. And once Drake sees that, he starts becoming more combative, more dismissive, and more willing to speak from a place of superiority. To understand that shift, it helps to bring in Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette's masculine archetypes: the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. Early Drake is dominated by the lover. He wants intimacy, recognition, belonging, and emotional proof that the pain meant something. But as the mythology around fame begins to collapse, the lover is no longer enough. The wound changes shape. He is no longer just wounded by love or fame, he is wounded by the collapse of his own belief system. The industry he once wanted to enter turns out to be filled with the same insecurity he was trying to escape. The elders are not serene. The gatekeepers are not invincible. The mentors are not gods. They are anxious, territorial, jealous, and human. In the psychology of mentorship, this is often where disillusionment begins. The mentee discovers that admiration does not always lead to guidance. Sometimes it leads to rivalry. Sometimes the mentor does not bless the next generation. Sometimes the mentor protects their own throne. For Drake, that realization becomes part of his negative change arc. Failed mentorship turns into conquest. Once the gods become ordinary, Drake no longer wants their approval, he wants their position. The fantasy of the music industry breaks, and with it, the old need to be accepted by the hierarchy goes with it. He sees that people above him are not untouchable, they are emotional, they are insecure, they are more vulnerable than they look. We zoom in on the famous line he ushered in on "I'm on one," the throne is for the taking, and then the threat sharpens, watch me take it. This is Drake crossing from wounded student into shadow king. He is no longer asking the old order to recognize him. He is recognizing that the throne is available, and if the people sitting on it are acting ordinary, then maybe they were never gods at all. It is around this time where his run is becoming undeniable. In his career, Drake is becoming hard to reject. There is an aspect of the music industry, the darkness of entertainment, that begins to taint the young man we've known since he's been a teenager. His first full-blown conflict in hip-hop was against Philadelphia rapper Meek Mill, a friend turned foe. On a slew of records, Drake doesn't point his ire toward Meek Mill solely. Drake really has one record pointed at Meek, and that's Back to Back. He additionally points to the system and the business of music. On 30 for 30 Freestyle, Drake's paranoia becomes institutional for the first time. It is no longer just women, friends, or rival rappers disappointing him. Now he imagines the higher-ups moving together as a collective to send him a message. That matters because Drake's negative change arc has now widened. The enemy is no longer personal, it has become structural. The music industry itself becomes a force trying to humble him, and Drake responds by hardening even more. 30 for 30 is where the wounded ambition turns into a siege mentality. The empire is not just something he wants to build, it becomes something he believes he has to defend. So what did Drake see between The Resistance and 30 for 30 Freestyle? He saw the fantasy break. In The Resistance, Drake still sounds like a young artist standing at the doorway of the industry trying to understand what fame will cost him. He is anxious, reflective, emotional, and somewhat hopeful. There is still a sense that if he works hard enough, if he proves himself enough, if he becomes undeniable enough, the world he dreamed of entering will finally embrace him. But by the time we get to 30 for 30 Freestyle, that hope has soured. The energy is different. The young man we once knew has now experienced betrayal from perceived friends, peers, idols, and mentors. He has seen admiration turn into jealousy. He has seen friendship turn into competition. He has seen the higher-ups move less like wise elders and more like a political class protecting its own power. In his second high-profile beef against Pusha T, Drake's child is revealed to the world, and the only way his adversary would know he had a child is if someone dear to Drake exposed it. What then happens? He points his ire not squarely at Pusha T, but to his former idol and friend Kanye West. This seems to be the core wound that poisons Drake and throws him into a deeper negative change arc, the collapse of the mentor figure. In mythology and storytelling, the mentor does not always have to literally die. Sometimes the mentor dies symbolically. The hero realizes the person he admired is flawed, afraid, jealous, or protecting their own power. That disillusionment becomes a kind of death. The sacred image collapses, and with it the hero's innocence. And from that point forward, the journey is no longer about being blessed by the old order. It becomes about surviving without its approval. That symbolic death is devastating because it destroys innocence. Once the mentor falls, the world loses its sacred structure. The hierarchy that was once noble becomes corrupt. The throne that once looked unreachable suddenly looks available. And once the hero realizes the old gods are not gods at all, admiration can curdle into resentment, and I honestly believe that's why Drake reveres Lil Wayne so much. He's a figure from the old guard who has never let him down. But this is where Drake's negative change arc begins to harden. He no longer wants acceptance from the people above him. He wants proof that they were never above him in the first place. The fantasy of the music industry becomes poisoned by its reality. The dream does not disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes conquest, it becomes defense, it becomes time for him to build his empire. And this is not unique to Drake. This is one of the most powerful patterns in fiction. A young man enters a hierarchy with rose-colored glasses, believing the system will give him meaning, family, protection, or destiny. Then the system betrays him, and that betrayal does not humble him, it radicalizes him. We see this with Anakin Skywalker. He enters the Jedi Order believing it will give him purpose, discipline, and belonging, but over time, he experiences the Order less as a home and more as a structure of denial. They ask him for loyalty, but do not fully trust him. They tell him to master his emotions, but do not know how to help him survive them. The institution that was once supposed to guide Anakin, in his mind, humiliates him. Once Anakin believes the Jedi have failed him, his desire for love and protection mutates into domination. We also see this again with Michael Corleone. At first, Michael stands apart from the family business. He wants to believe he is different. He wants to believe there is a clean world outside of the corruption of his father's empire. But betrayal, violence, institutional failure, they all pull him back in. The government is corrupt. The police are corrupt. Rival families are corrupt. A respectable society is just another costume for power. And once Michael sees that, he stops trying to escape the hierarchy. He decides to master it. That is the same tragic pattern operating in Drake's arc. The young Drake's entrance into the world he admires. The later Drake wants control over the world that disappointed him. He starts by seeking recognition from the gods, but once the gods reveal themselves as insecure, he stops asking for their blessing. What do you do when you're Drake and you've realized that it's all a lie? You go deeper. You head deeper into the path you've been running, which is why today you hear Drake rap with venom, toughness, and vitriol. He has accepted his role as the villain in rap because many people have pushed him in that direction. Regardless, the old Drake is gone. He will never come back. And I think it's for the better, whether it's for his music or for his personal sanity.
And I also think one of my biggest accomplishments is the fact that I didn't let this massive, massive change in my life destroy me, you know? I still don't do drugs, you know, I drink, but even if I drink every day, I don't drink to black out, I don't drink to escape my sadness, I don't drink to the point that it affects my family or my career. I think I'm just happy that I'm still intact. You know, that's my biggest accomplishment. I made a lot of money. I made, you know, did a lot of things, been a lot of places, had a lot of opportunities to fuck this up and didn't. And, you know, I could be at dinner with my mom and still hear her say, like, you know, I'm proud, you're still you, you're in there, you know? I'm looking at you, you're there, it's you. It's not like a shell of who you used to be or some shit like that, you know?